The mainstream believes that they say that this rock art is depicting people dancing. But you can see the similarity around the world with the two dots on either side. It's more than just something depicting people dancing. It's depicting something that they all saw in common. And the actual plasma distorts in the sky, so that sometimes it will look like it has a bird's head, and you quite often see depictions in mythology of characters with birds' heads and other features like that. This is an artist's depiction of what it might have looked like in the sky, Squatter Man, the plasma image as a result of a large EMP hitting Earth.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the Land of Chem. I'm your host and the author. My name is Jeffrey Drum. Thank you all so much for joining me again.
All right, everyone, welcome back. This is Versus Episode 2, an ongoing series where I have invited academics, professionals, and experts from a variety of disciplines for ongoing discussions regarding the function of ancient technology from around the world, specifically regarding the theories presented here on the Land of Chem. And today I'm rocking the Land of Chem White Horse logo because in this video we will be evaluating ancient lightning technology, the function of the handheld devices of the ancient Egyptians, and a fascinating new hypothesis for the Sumerian handbags featuring renowned cogeneration power and chemical production plant mechanical engineer, the one and only Andy Hall. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. I think that's it for today's intro, so without further ado, let's get right to it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the now second installment of this epic new series called The Land of Chem Versus, which will be an ongoing series of discussions where I've invited academics, professionals, and career experts from various disciplines to discuss the ancient technology from around the world, specifically the hypotheses presented here on the Land of Chem. And ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor and pleasure to have the one and only Andy Hall. And the crowd goes wild. Whoa, yeah. So Andy, I've been really excited about this. And as I was telling you backstage, the first episode of the Land of Chem Versus was PhD chemist versus the function of the Great Pyramid. And you're my second guest here on the Land of Chem Versus. And for anybody that doesn't know, if you're watching this channel, I can almost guarantee that you've heard of Andy Hall and the electric universe theory and his involvement therein. But Andy, if you would, why don't you just introduce yourself, including a quick overview of your academic, professional, and career background and expertise so people know exactly who you are and kind of what your qualifications are regarding the discussion on ancient technology.
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. So I was born in Tucson, Arizona, and I went to school at the University of Arizona. And I have a mechanical engineering degree from U of A. And after school, I worked for a little bit in Hughes Aircraft for aerospace industry and in manufacturing for a couple of years. And then I worked in the oil business and energy business. And for the most part, my career, I worked building power plants, actually, in the oil field and in refineries. They were both mostly cogeneration power plants where we produced both electricity and steam for the refining process. But we built similar plants in all around the world. I built power plants in Indonesia and in Thailand, and worked down in South America and Colombia, and built several plants here in the U.S., including several in California and Canada. So after building power plants, I retired from the oil business and worked still in the power industry as a consultant and in the renewable industry, and worked in solar projects, and did that for about 5 years too. And then I retired from that and started getting involved in other things like the electric universe.
Excellent.
And
So technically, I guess, your academic specialty and your degree is in mechanical engineering, but then you are also a power plant designer, engineer, involved in the construction and operation. And I believe you referred to these things as cogeneration power plants that also involved chemical processes. Am I correct in that understanding?
yeah, you're right. We built the cogeneration process is basically you build a power plant, but then you use the waste heat from the power plant to do something else. The usually to produce steam for a refinery or oil field operation. In
Okay.
my case, but we also use that steam or thermal energy in other ways. And we looked at chemical plants, and I've been in chemical plants and paper mills and every kind of processing plant you can imagine. I've been in mines, the borax mining, and
Yeah.
different coal mining operations all around the world, looking at opportunities for doing that kind of a project, because they're very applicable in any kind of industry where they use power and heat at the same time. It's the most efficient way actually to produce power by cogeneration.
And that really fits in so well with kind of the theories that I've presented here on the channel in my work regarding, all of the ancient technology around the world. Is we're utilizing nature's electricity as the power source of this ancient technology that involves chemical processes, whether this be atmospheric nitrate fertilizers or industrial scale chemical manufacturing within the Egyptian pyramids. And it also sort of correlates to my work on the hydrocarbon processing within the stepped pyramid, the production of ammonia, these industrial scale mining operations. All of these things kind of work in conjunction. So it's a remarkable similarity, your professional, academic, and career expertise in relation to what I've proposed here on the channel and in my book and in my videos. So I've always been curious, and I may have asked you, so shout out Ben and Finn from the Brainstorm channel for getting us together for an absolutely epic first conversation and introduction. And I guess this was almost 2 years ago now. I woke up in the morning, and I've been a big follower of the electric universe for probably at least 10 years. And I knew of your work from way, way back, and I'm a big fan. And you're a person that I hold in the utmost respect and esteem. Andy, you're one of the best in the industry and somebody that I really, really respect. And I woke up one morning and my phone and my Instagram and my email was blowing up. Like I kept getting message after message. Dude, have you seen this on the EU? Andy Hall just made a video about your work, and I was just kept getting blown up. And I was already a subscriber to the Thunderbolts Project YouTube channel. And so of course I had gotten that video in my recommendations that morning, and it was the first thing that I watched, and I was totally blown away. Probably the greatest honor and recognition that I've received in the past 6 years since I publicly released my work was being acknowledged by the one and only Andy Hall. So, Andy, how did you find out about my work?
I just happened to cross it on YouTube,
Awesome.
I mean, I just literally stumbled into it. I think it came up in my feed probably just because of the type of stuff I look at all the time.
Thank you, algorithm gods, for finally putting me in contact with somebody that
the algorithm worked for once.
For once,
in a good way. And I was stunned when I watched your first program. I watched, and then I watched snippets here and there. I was really excited. I watched a few of your shows, and I was just captivated because I could see immediately you were, well, I've always looked at these facilities the way you do. I've never dug into it, but I've always had this suspicion that they have a practical use, not just burial mounds, right? So I've always been curious about that. I've always watched shows like the power plant discussions and things like documentaries and that sort of thing. So it's always fascinated me. And when I saw your program, I can't remember what you were talking about at the time, the first one I saw, but it struck me, it resonated with me, if you will, that you knew what you were looking at for one thing. and knew what to look for. The other thing, you were asking the right questions, and that really struck me. And so I was really taken by that, and watched a few of your programs and decided I ought to write something up about it. It gave me a good opportunity to write about a topic that I'm really into and interested in. And up to that point, I've been writing mostly about, geology and the earth. And, my work has been on electrical scarring on the earth and evidence of electrical scarring on the earth and plasma storms in the past. And, but megalithic, the megaliths all around the world and the iconography from them, I'm not in any way an expert in that, but I sure have an armchair interest, and have, been into that for years and years. So I think what you're doing is just uncovering the truth about what these facilities were made for.
Andy, I appreciate that so much. And I remember watching, just like sort of in a state of suspended disbelief, that I was, as I watched your video that was published on the Thunderbolts Project channel, I couldn't believe that you were talking about my work, and again, sort of acknowledging that I was on the right track in regard to recognizing the power source from nature's electricity. Again, I sort of disagree with the conventional hypothesis that the Great Pyramid is a power plant where the actual product was electricity. Mine is kind of the opposite side of the coin. So the conventional story is Christopher Dunn, where chemicals are the input and power is the output. Mine is kind of the exact opposite from that, where nature's electricity is actually the input and the output is chemicals. And in the previous episode, I actually had on a PhD chemist that was published in Christopher Dunn's book, and he was arguing, based on the chemical analysis data of the calcium sulfate that was discovered in the Queen's chamber, that hydrochloric acid could not have been involved in those processes. And he came to the same conclusion as I did, that there had to be sulfuric acid inside of the Queen's chamber to produce this calcium sulfate. So that was a fantastic discussion. And in your article, to again briefly summarize, and I'll put links to everything. I'll put it, if it's okay, Andy, I'll put a link to your blog. I'll put a link to that article that you wrote, and I'll put a link to the Thunderbolts Project video that you published entitled Megalithic Chemistry, just sort of a summary of my work, acknowledging the fact that telluric currents and lightning were most likely involved in the power source of these structures around the world, and that a likely output of these systems is chemicals. And, I would never be one to say that I've got this 100% right, but I think I am 100% in the right direction in looking at the mechanisms of application, the mechanisms of operation, and then the inevitable output of these systems makes a lot of sense from a chemical production standpoint.
Oh, absolutely. All respect to Christopher Dunn and the work he's performed, which is, really amazing. But I think he's looking at it from the wrong end, and you're looking at it from the right end. That facility is there to process chemicals and utilize power to do that, rather than produce power, because I don't see any kind of ancillary facilities to deliver power from the pyramid somewhere else to do anything with. And he has ideas about shooting it into space, and it's like, what are you doing with the electricity that you're producing? And in your way of looking at it, everything falls into place. It makes sense. There's a purpose and there's a utility for it. And so yeah, I noticed that right away. I was never really, Chris Dunn's work always fascinated me, but it didn't captivate me that it was, accurate. And yours immediately did. It just made sense.
So how did you make the leap from, again, being an academic mechanical engineer and then working as a plant engineer, designer, operator for cogeneration power and chemical plants? How did you then take the leap and get involved with the electric universe theory and the Thunderbolts Project, and explain maybe your involvement in that team as well?
there's a kind of the change to start looking at alternative science, if you will, took place slowly over time, over a 20-year period of kind of waking up, if you will. And it started partly because I was working in the power industry and I was working in the renewables industry. I went into it with a heartfelt belief I was helping save the world from, potential catastrophe and climate change. And I found out it was all a political pile of crap.
Yeah.
I mean, the climate change story. And, I just learned from the inside out what was going on and became very disillusioned. When I worked for large oil companies, I felt a high degree of integrity in the work I did and the work that we were doing. Like we were doing something good. People vilify oil companies for producing black oil, and it's a dirty thing. People perceive it that way, but it's what the world would run on. And in producing oil and electricity and the developing power plants in places like Sumatra and the hill country of Thailand, where power didn't exist before. We're bringing electricity to people who didn't have it before. I think we were doing a lot of good. And then when I got into the solar business, it was just the opposite. I felt I was working for a bunch of greedy, politically motivated jerks. And I got out of it pretty quick, and I was very disillusioned. And so I started digging into the science behind the climate science and learning about that. And one of the books I looked at was by a guy named Roy Spencer. He's a former, I believe, NASA climate scientist, but he was one of the first people to be labeled as a denier, because he wrote this book called The Chilling Stars, and I believe that was the title. And it basically connected our climate to the sun and the solar cycles, and also astronomical cycles, including connection with supernova events in the near neighborhood. There are connections to cosmic ray events and climate cycles. So I realized from reading his book and then other research that led to that, our climate really is driven by the sun and the energy that the earth is getting from the sun and from the cosmic rays. And that's what, and so, just going down that rabbit hole led me to the Electric Universe and the Thunderbolts project.
Yeah.
And then when I heard Dave Talbot and Wal Thornhill talk about the Electric Universe, it was like seeing you for the first time. I did the same thing. I just went down that rabbit hole and learned everything I could about it, and realized that, they were onto the true science. Everything made sense to me. And so I decided that to really understand this, and I ought to look into it myself and do my own research. And I decided I'm not an astrophysicist. But I have some background in with geology, being from the oil business, and I live on the earth. It's under my feet. So I thought I can look at that. Let's figure out where the electrical scarring on the earth is. Where's the evidence here on earth?
Yeah.
And once I started looking into it, funny enough, it was my aerodynamics and mechanical engineering background that brought me to discover that mountains are made as windswept dunes in supersonic plasma winds. And so what I was learning about mountains from my research was that our geology is mostly wrong.
Yeah.
And that and then in reality, the face of the earth, the landscape that we see is mostly carved from plasma winds, from massive storms that occurred, in prehistory.
So I recently started looking at, I'm sure you're familiar with Pumapunku.
Yes.
And I recently started looking into that, and I have an upcoming hypothesis on the function of the H blocks and the temple at Pumapunku. And I always have, well, I've recently implemented Google Earth as a way to investigate the landscape surrounding these ancient structures. And the landscape surrounding Pumapunku screams electric universe geology.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we find
Yeah.
this similarity. I did an episode on Teotihuacan where I was looking at the geology using Google Earth. Again, there's all sorts of these electric universe plasma discharge mountain shapes and ridges and all of these formations that, just scream EU involvement. So let me ask you a rather controversial question regarding your expertise in the petroleum industry. So do you believe the narrative that, quote unquote fossil fuels are a finite research or a resource, or do you think that it's actually a renewable resource that's produced by our planet naturally?
I think it's probably renewable. I mean, I don't know that for a fact, and it's
Yeah.
not my area of expertise, but I don't believe the standard line about it all being fossil deposits. No.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the more I don't really, that's not my area of expertise, but I've always sort of been very suspect of the idea that, petroleum itself comes from, fossils. That doesn't make sense at all, given the way that the earth works and the biological processes and geological processes within our planet that could possibly be producing these materials as a natural byproduct of just the way the earth works.
Yeah, it's never made sense to me. Well, in fact, dinosaurs don't make sense either unless gravity was different in the past.
Sure.
there,
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
there
The
are a lot of
size.
things that don't make sense.
Yeah. So people also have made that argument regarding giant human beings in the past too. The potential for larger hominids and Homo sapien type creatures that either there was more oxygen or less gravity in the ancient past, which certainly could also be a discussion regarding the construction of these monuments like the Egyptian pyramids and moving large megaliths and things like that. I know people have suggested that that's one potential, is that during the construction the gravity was different back then, but I don't necessarily have any background on that research or an opinion either way on that. So when in general, so then okay, so mechanical engineer, career in designing, building, operating cogeneration power and chemical production plants, involvement in the electric universe theory. So then, how did you get interested in the ancient technology around the planet, and specifically your work? And we can kind of jump from two different topics here. How'd you get involved in looking in ancient technology? Obviously, I think I know the answer to that because there's a direct connection between the electric universe work and the ancient technology around the planet. But you did a really fascinating episode. Again, this is probably a year ago now, on the electric universe regarding some of the artifacts of the dynastic Egyptians, specifically the Ankh, the Was scepter, and some of these other handheld objects. So again, how did you get involved in researching ancient technology and ancient artifacts? And we can go ahead and jump into. I know you had some material you wanted to share today, and I'm really excited to jump into this to learn a little bit more about your ideas regarding these handheld objects.
Well, I guess with respect to megaliths in general, I got interested because of their construction. I mean, because I discovered that Earth has been subject to these plasma storms, and these plasma storms were such that they built mountains, right?
Yep.
And they blew supersonic winds, and built mountains 30,000 foot tall. Something very drastic was going on, and of course, in the electric universe, we believe that the solar system was in disarray in the past. That planets were in different positions in the sky, and that basically there was an event, or more than one event, that was witnessed by people on Earth, and that's why we have petroglyphs, and we have
Yep.
These mythologies about stories about Mars and Venus and so forth. And so in looking at the megaliths, just their way they're constructed with, no gaps with rock work, stone work that is just so amazing that they would meticulously fit these giant stones together without any seams or gaps, without using mortar. Why would they do that? And then there are a bunch of other, issues there with the megaliths. Why were they built and what were they built for? But just how were they built? But why were they built the way they were is what it's always fascinated me the most. And it occurs to me that they were built to withstand plasma storms. They were built with the stones mated together so closely to prevent sparking between the gaps. If you leave any gaps, you have a discontinuity. You're going to introduce water and potentially a spark gap that could then cause a fire or electrocute somebody. And so I believe they were building these walls mated together so tightly so that they had continuity. And then you also look at, they use those little butterfly
joints,
joints,
the clamps,
of bronze or iron between the stones, and they're only about an inch thick. And ancient iron is highly brittle. Bronze is practically worthless as a structural metal, and yet they were using them, and people call them connectors, like they're holding the rocks together.
Yeah.
Well, 2 10-ton rocks, anything that's going to move them around, like an earthquake or anything like that, any force strong enough to do that is going to snap a little inch wide piece of iron or bronze. So those connectors are not structural. They're for electrical continuity, electrical connection between the stones. And they're used, it seems typically, from what I've been able to gather, they're used in the floors most of the time rather than in the walls, although they might be in the walls some. But the floor is key, because the floor is where people are going to be walking, or animals or anything like that, where you might end up having a spark that could either hurt somebody or create a step voltage between one stone and another if you're walking, if there's no continuity. And someone could get hurt, or a fire could get started or something like that.
So we actually specifically recognize those. The last time we were at Dendara Temple, the Dendara Temple, the most ancient part of the floor, is all anchored with these butterfly clamps. And I think I sent you my episode where I was looking at that it's called the Lost Pyramid, the abandoned pyramid structure that's on the precipice of a modern quarry. There's that huge depression behind it, and all of the interior blocks and the whole system is clamped together with these butterfly clamps. And I actually agree with that proposal that, it's for electrical conductivity. And I think in our previous discussion on the Brainstorm channel, you had said it's like a grounding mat, and that was part of the framework of systems that you had implemented in your power plant design, is that they have similar systems for grounding near high voltage electrical systems to prevent, shock discharge and all this stuff from people walking on the floor.
Yeah, if you what people don't see if you drive by a power plant is what's under the ground. When especially underneath the switch yard, the substations, there's a grounding grid of copper that is an extensive grid work of copper to make sure that all points are connected to ground solidly, so that there's no possibility of a step voltage developing. And this is particularly true in the fence around the place. The fencing has to be welded to this grounding grid underneath the ground, meticulously welded and tested to make sure that there's no discontinuity that could create a gap that would then result in a step voltage that would shock somebody. And so a step voltage means like the ground would build a voltage, and if there's no connection to, say, a piece of equipment that's sitting on a concrete foundation, and it's not built the voltage, but the ground has, and there's a differential called a step voltage between the two. And if you're standing on the ground and you touch that piece of equipment, you could be shocked or killed, depending on how bad the voltage is.
So that brings up an interesting discussion regarding the implementation of the iron vein network on the Giza Plateau. I think I brought that to your attention and maybe showed you some pictures and sent you some
Yeah.
videos of that. It's such an ignored feature of the Giza Plateau that it's really a travesty in our understanding of the function of the Giza Plateau pyramid system that people don't look at this massive iron vein integrated grid network that not only grounds the pyramid structures themselves, but also integrates all of the various components all over the Giza Plateau, because all of the adjacent pyramids and mastabas and other structures are all directly connected into this iron vein network. And I've sort of
Yeah.
proposed that it's dual function, like as above, so below, is that this iron vein network facilitates the uptake of telluric currents building charge within the structure, but then it also serves for grounding and high voltage electric current distribution when it comes from above from a lightning strike, making sure that the entire system is properly grounded and then distributing that electric current into various components across the plateau.
Yeah, when you showed me that, I was amazed. That's your power supply right there.
Yep.
That's your power supply to the Giza power plant. And of course, the fact that it's the pyramid sits between that and the sky above. And if you had plasma storms, highly electrical storms, it's a capacitor sitting between the two.
Correct.
And that's exactly what you would want to do to capture the power from it and to generate power from it. So when you showed me those veins, I mean, that was just amazing. That's why they built the pyramids right there. That's why they're there. The veins came first and everything else was built on top of it because they were there, is my
100%
belief.
agree. And
Yeah.
there's kind of two things that I'll bring up today that was featured in a recent members only episode. So there was a paper that came out a while back that showed that the Great Pyramid could concentrate both electric and magnetic fields in the area surrounding the king's chamber. And they used radio waves as the input vector to induce this electric field within the limestone dielectric material of the Great Pyramid. And I never really realized that, during lightning storms, you also have a significant amount of electromagnetic energy wave generation, specifically including radio waves. So lightning creates radio waves. And so we have a direct connection between lightning, radio waves, and the activation of these electric fields within the king's chamber that create this resonant oscillation for the generation of ultrasound within the king's chamber and antechamber that are the ultrasound catalyst of this chemical manufacturing process.
Now, he's saying that if you zap the outside of the pyramid with radio frequencies, you can then get ultrasound frequencies inside.
Yeah, so let me describe the parameters of the experiment. So they used a software called COMSOL Multiphysics software, which is it's a physics modeling software, and they did a remodel of the exact geometry of the Great Pyramid and set it to a dielectric constant of 7, like a solid block of dielectric limestone, which has a dielectric constant of 7. And they did several different tests. They did input vectors from below and input vector from above, where the input was radio waves with, varying wavelengths from like 300 meters to about 200 meters. And they showed that within the pyramid, when you have the input of radio waves from above, the pyramid develops an intense electrical field at the top of the pyramid that actually completely excludes the capstone, which corresponds directly to my hypothesis that if we were to change that input from below to telluric currents, you would get a positive field accumulation at the top of the structure, which is literally your target for negatively charged cloud to ground lightning. Yeah. When they changed the input vector from above, they got a significant electric field concentration only in the area surrounding the king's chamber and the antechamber. The rest of the structure was left with normal electric field, but a very intense electric field surrounding the king's chamber. And we know that the king's chamber and the antechamber have red granite and quartz content. And by creating an electric field within these dielectric materials, which also involves the radio wave oscillation for the activation of ultrasound, that's my addition to that research paper. So my hypothesis is that the quartz is not for piezoelectric, which is the conventional explanation, is that they were using mechanical vibrations to create electricity. I think it's the exact opposite, where the electricity creates an electric field to then have the output of ultrasound, which is known as sonochemistry. It's a new sort of area of chemistry where they use ultrasound to catalyze chemical reactions.
That's interesting.
So an interesting correlation there between those two things.
What would what are they using the ultrasound what kind of chemical process or reaction are they using?
Yeah, so the conversion of sulfur dioxide into sulfur trioxide for the production of dilute sulfuric acid. And again, we were talking about this in the previous episode. So there was a layer of calcium sulfate that was discovered inside of the Grand Gallery and inside of the Queen's Chamber, almost 2 inches thick of calcium sulfate. And this is a direct result of the chemical reaction between dilute sulfuric acid and the limestone walls that produces calcium sulfate, which in and of itself is only slightly soluble in dilute sulfuric acid. So essentially, it's a protective layer that develops during the reaction process that stops the dilute sulfuric acid from further reacting with and deteriorating the limestone walls. So it's like a self-sustaining, self-generating, self-repairing coating compound.
Cool. Yeah.
And they also found actual gypsum plaster in there. The Egyptians were well-versed in manufacturing various types of plasters and coating compounds, calcium sulfate gypsum plaster being one of those, which could have served the same purpose for a coating compound that sealed the interior reaction chambers.
This is fascinating. All these evidence that you have been able to uncover of, I've never heard of these things before. These veins under the pyramid and the coatings, 2-inch thick coating inside the walls of the pyramid. That's just amazing that all this stuff is there, and you never hear it mentioned, at least in the mainstream.
Yeah. Have you ever been to Egypt, Andy?
No, I haven't. I'd love to. I want to come. I want to come, and I want you to show me around. I will come in the next year.
So please accept this as my open invitation, and I would graciously host you and make sure you get, everything from airport escort to hotel setup and transportation and everything. We'll get you set up right. Maybe give it a couple of weeks or months, make sure everything settles down in the region.
Yeah.
But
I'm not wait.
yeah, everything here has been very peaceful. Thankfully, again, Egypt stays uninvolved in the ongoing conflicts. So now I know you've prepared some materials and some presentation. Do you know how to do the screen share on your end to pull that up so we can take a look at that?
Well, I don't see any buttons here to control anything.
Yeah, so if you just move your cursor around.
Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. It's up now. I just needed to click my mouse.
Yep, and then you'll see a little green icon that says share.
Okay. Choose what to share.
And then you should be able to
screen.
Yep, share screen. And your entire screen, and it'll pop up here in a second. So everybody, just to give you some background, again, my research focuses mainly on the function of the Egyptian pyramids, stone circles, adjacent temples, things of this nature. And again, it's been probably a year or two since this episode came out. Andy published a fantastic episode on the Thunderbolts Project channel, and I'll put a link to everything in the video description below regarding some of the handheld artifacts from ancient Egypt, specifically regarding their function with electricity. The Ankh, the Was scepter, and a few other objects that we're going to take a look at now. And then I won't spoil the rest of the presentation because we're going to get into some really interesting stuff that came up during our brainstorm podcast that completely blew my mind. And then I'll introduce another new topic, including in this lightning technology from around the planet, because I want to get Andy's feedback on another geological and earth environmental process that's directly involved with lightning technology.
Okay, well, since we're on this subject, Egypt, and in discussing that, I have a few slides here we can talk about, and I don't have these in any particular order. So this isn't like a polished presentation or anything. I just have some images to throw up that we can talk about.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about those. I see you've got some stuff in there from Dendara, and then a picture of that necklace. There's some very interesting glyphs in the Dendara. It's called the Crypt of Dendara, which is where the Dendara light bulbs, quote unquote, light bulbs are featured. And I think you've got an image of the other one that actually shows the Hathor temple with the necklace over there. So we can take a look at that too. I'm glad you've got that in there.
Okay, good. So yeah, you know where all these are, and I don't, I don't have the context, but so correct me if I say anything ignorant. But
no, you're good. You're good.
What I noticed in looking at this stuff, these hieroglyphs and pictures and images that come out of Egypt, is a lot of stuff that looks electrical to me, and it looks like they're using especially static electricity, perhaps, but electricity in general, and they're using it biologically, physically. They're either immersing themselves into an electric field, or shocking themselves, or putting a current through themselves. And this is
you want to hear something interesting about that, Andy?
Yeah.
So, lightning is essentially a giant static electricity. It's no different than, if you were to touch a metal doorknob and you got an electrostatic shock. Lightning is just a massive, massive earth scale electrostatic discharge. And one of my hypotheses for some of the symbols, so when it comes to like the deities from ancient Egypt, Bastet, the cat god, is, in my opinion, connected to symbolism and discovery of static electricity. Anybody who's had a cat before knows that if you pet a cat for a while, you'll get a static electric buildup, and you can get a shock from petting a cat. And I've always thought that Bastet was directly connected to the symbolism for static electricity and possibly the discovery thereof.
You may be right. I've never. You're right about cats, because they sit in my lap and I pet them and they shock me every time. So that's the truth.
And I've got a full episode coming on that on the main channel coming up soon for anybody that's interested. I've also proposed that. So generally speaking, Andy, would you agree with this, that when it comes to the dynastic Egyptian iconography and hieroglyphs, I think we may have a misunderstanding of the intention of these hieroglyphs, and possibly we only understand maybe the superficial level of interpretation, and that there's a deeper meaning behind these images of the gods. For example, Amun connected to ammonia, Bastet being connected to static electricity, and some of these other images that Andy's going to be showing. We only understand maybe the superficial level that was intended for the everyday person, but then only the priests and initiates really understood the deeper, more significant meaning connected to their ancient technology.
Yeah. And I think it's important to point out that static electricity is very easy to generate very, very high voltages with static electricity, just with common household items like petting your cat. And so, remember that. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm seeing in some of this imagery. Is it looks like methods to produce high voltage static electricity. And the jed is one of the tools that is always recurring in Egypt art and is very important to them. It's very enigmatic, sort of a piece of a tool, and it reminds me of a capacitor because of these plates. I hope you can see my pointer.
Yeah,
The
Andy,
plates.
if you double click on any of those images, it should pop up a larger version of it.
Oh, there is that a little bit. So anyway, this looks like a capacitor plates, and you'll notice that the image here that she's putting her hand up here and crossing the plates, like connecting across the plates, which if these are intended to build static charge, then putting your hand across the plate would then create a discharge.
So try to
And
click on those images again so we can get the full thing pulled up. All right, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the video, and please remember to subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube if you're interested in the physics and chemistry technology of a lost civilization and the function of the Egyptian pyramids and other ancient structures from across the world. Thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video. There we go.
okay, now you've got an image.
Yep, you're good to go.
Oh, okay, there we go. All right, so we were talking about the jed,
Yep.
and this item shows up all over the place in Egypt. And as I was saying, it appears to me that it's built like a capacitor plates. Like these would build static charge of these plates here. And you'll notice that both of these people depicted are closing the gap between plates. She's putting her hand across two plates. He's putting a hand across these two plates. And it appears to me that they would be, closing the gap. If these are charged up, they're getting a current off of that. So I don't know what purpose they would do that for, but that appears to be what they're up to.
So an interesting note about the Jed pillar that recently came up in another episode. So that tilt of the Jed pillar is said to represent the axial tilt of the Earth.
Is that right?
Yep. And we find the same tilt at Avebury in the openings of the Avebury stone circle, which is directly related to telluric current uptake. So there's an opening on the east side of the circle and an opening on the north side of the circle. And the north and east sides are tilted to the exact same degree, which is approximately 22 to 25 degrees, which is Earth's precessional wobble or axial tilt. And telluric currents are known as diurnal, which means they have fluctuations during the day, flowing east to west during the day and north to south at night, following the Earth's geomagnetic poles. So Avebury has openings that are precisely calibrated to account for Earth's axial tilt at that approximately 24.5 degree tilt, the same thing that you see there in the Jed pillar tilt.
That's amazing. Now, why would that factor into the? You think it's just symbolic that they do it that way, or do you think it has function?
So in Avebury, it was definitely functional to facilitate the flow of telluric currents into the structure, coming east to west during the day and then north to west at night. I think with the Jed pillar, it's just encoding their knowledge of that Earth's axial tilt.
Okay. Yeah, because that's how because I can't think of a function for the tilting the Jed, but symbolically that makes sense. Yeah.
So let me throw something out to you. So I had made an episode a while back on the Jed pillar. I think this was on my members only channel, where I had proposed that the Jed pillar is possibly a lightning arrestor.
Yeah, it's also built to look like a lightning arrestor or insulator of some kind.
Yep.
That could be right, that these are built to, on the other hand, it could be that these are actually to collect charge.
Yeah.
But Actually, I don't. Do you know how these were made, or what materials they were made of? Because
Yeah,
I
so an
suspect
interesting
these are.
note about the Jed pillar. So the symbolism in terms of dynastic Egyptian iconography, the Jed pillar is meant to represent stability. It's the backbone of Osiris and it represents stability. So the way I've integrated that into my work is that that stability represents electrical stability within your network of connected components, a lightning arrestor being something that could protect the rest of the system from excess discharge voltage. So again, that JED pillar is providing the electrical stability for the network. We don't know what they were originally made from. It's just an image. Some of the ancient dynastic texts say that they were made of reeds, but no JED pillar artifact has ever been discovered. They just have like amulets and beads and depictions of them, but no physical pillar has ever been discovered. So we have no idea what it's actually made of.
Interesting. I've always wondered. I've always assumed that it is reeds because the depictions I've seen, that seems to be what they portray.
Right. Yeah.
And
And
so I've
that's sort of
assumed
what
that,
the conventional mythology surrounding the Jed pillar said. It's a bundle of reeds.
yeah. But then these plates, I've assumed are probably made of stone or metal, but I don't
Metal. Yeah.
know that either. But if they're stone or metal, then they would be charge collectors, and the reed shaft would be insulating. So um, I could see them using these to collect static charge and then deliver it somehow. But anyway, it's too bad we don't have any actual ones to know what they are actually made of.
So when it comes to collecting static charge, what do you think about the function of the Ark of the Covenant?
Oh, it's like some kind of capacitor.
Capacitor. Yeah. Yeah. I think
That's
that's,
everything I've heard indicates that it's some kind of a capacitor
yeah.
that builds a huge charge and then discharges, and so people go up and touch it. That's the step voltage. That's what a step voltage is. If you went up and if an arc built up a big charge, and you were standing on a wet floor next to it that was not connected, and you made the connection by touching, the ark, then that's how you would get zapped and killed. And that's what, in the Bible, that says that's what happened. So
Yep.
makes sense to me. Although I still don't know, like, what do you do with that? What do you do with a big box of charge? I don't know how they utilized it.
So when it comes to Egyptian temples, in my research, I think that the Ark of the Covenant is a later implementation of something that was called the solar bark in Egypt. And they used to have these bark artifacts, which are essentially Ark of the Covenant, but it looks more like a boat instead of a box. And these arks were brought into the temples and they were locked into place inside the Holy of Holies of these temples in Upper Egypt, like Luxor Temple, Dendara Temple. What's the other one, babe, that we went to with the one? Edfu Temple. They have these housings in the Holy of Holies where these solar barks were locked into place inside the Holy of Holies. So I think that they were for activation of the actual temple and distribution and discharge of that electric current into the temple itself.
Yeah. Well, it seems like if you had a box capacitor like that, you would get one big discharge out of it,
Yep.
And one big zap. And maybe that's what they were looking for. Maybe that was, to them, a very spiritual thing.
And the thing about the solar barks is the ritual is that, was it once or twice a year? They would carry these things up to the roof of the temple to quote unquote recharge them. So perhaps they were up there getting struck by lightning. This thing gets charged with a massive amount of voltage, and then you lock it back into place in the temple and perhaps it had a slow discharge mechanism where that capacitor could be, like a battery, a gradual drain on the battery.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wonder how they would have done that. But it could be that it was immersed in a fluid or something like that too. Well, are you seeing this picture?
Yeah. I've got your next one up, and yeah, you could just, whenever you move through, you can just click through those. There should be a little arrow. Yeah,
Okay.
perfect.
Yeah. Well, so this one is depicting a servant bringing up these, the tools, the different Ankh and tools, and they're on this tray, and there are a couple of looks like incense burners or something like that. And I just wondered, this to me appears like they're either uh, neutralizing these things of charge or giving them a charge, perhaps by placing these tools here next to these burning incense or whatever that could be delivering an ionic charge to these items. And then I notice also in a lot of these images, they depict continuity, like they're always hanging on to some kind of tool or framework, and it indicates electrical continuity to me. You'll notice in all the images, like the pharaoh or is touching the head of this image here. They're always sticking these things up to their face, all these different kinds of tools. And
Yep.
they're depicted quite often with these tables, which I assume are feathers. Like, I don't know, but these look like feathers.
You know
And
what
it
the
looks like a
conventional
table.
explanation for those things is?
What?
Loaves of bread.
Loaves of bread. Oh, I
That's
think
what
it's a
they
table.
say. That's what they say those things are. Is I've been told from numerous people, Egyptologists and friend tour guides, that those things represent loaves of bread, which that's absolutely not what it is.
Yeah, I see these, and I see a static charge. I see a Van de Graaff generator is what I see.
Yep, I agree with that.
And then here, it's like the tools, this connects to this, and he's about to touch these things to it. It's like they're always touching the tools together to connect them. Continuity is, for an electrical circuit. Again, they're connecting the tools and touching them. And I can't see why, other than to deliver a charge.
So go back to that one. That's an interesting one. So I can tell people the three things that are in there. So you've actually got three different tools in this image. You have the Jed pillar, you have the Ankh, and then the Was scepter. So the Jed pillar is on the right, the Ankh is in the middle, and then the Was scepter is on the left. And
Right here.
The Was scepter is usually depicted where somebody is pushing it into the ground. So it's like a grounding apparatus. And I've also heard proposed that that was one of the ways you could discharge the arc, is by putting the Was scepter into the ground and then dropping the Was scepter onto the arc, creating connectivity into the ground to discharge it to make it safe to operate with.
I noticed there's the wasp, the Ankh, and the Jed right here, all in one.
Yep.
And that he's holding that in this hand,
Yep.
apparently.
And it's a big stick that touches all the way into the ground. I believe that's Ptah.
That totally makes sense, and why it's built that way too. A little fork. So here again, now in this case, he's got like the incense burner going, and I think they're burning something that is giving off, fumes that are ionic in nature and charging up the tools, and they're made of, I assume, they're probably gold plated or silver or some other metal.
So here in this one, you see the hand, and then there's like little droplets or beads leading into the tail end of the incense burner.
Right here.
Yeah, that usually represents the distribution of liquid, or they're pouring something or distributing something. That's the way they used to depict either dropping liquid or possibly the movement of some sort of current into that particular artifact, those little droplets or beads.
Yeah. So, and then he's got this bushy thing here. There's always a big bushy thing nearby, at their feet or next to them. And again, I think it's static generator, a Van de Graaff generator. And then there are quite a few of the Akhenaten imageries that depict them in the sun's rays, and they're always holding up their lotus flowers or whatever these depict, but they're holding them up and catching the sun's rays, and they depict the sun's rays collecting on these items next to them as well, which again implies to me that they're perhaps collecting charge on these items, static charge.
And then, of course, you could see the elongated skulls of Akhenaten's two daughters there as well.
Well, yeah, that gets to maybe one of the purposes for, one could speculate, for the electricity. But this is another depiction of this. I assume this is the sun, anyway, that they're worshiping. But again, it's depicting the solar rays hitting their artifacts and holding them up to catch the sun's rays. And I believe that could be their collecting charge. And then they wear these collared necklaces that are heavy with gold and jewels, and then they wear the big headdresses, and they're always being depicted as touching the headdress. Another thing that I see quite a bit. And so they wear these collars and these big headdresses, and I wonder if they're not developing like an electric field around their heads. And when they're being depicted as being touched, that's the gods, blessing them with current or charge.
And even, copper jewelry is said to be really beneficial for promoting the earth's or the body's natural electric circuit balance. Copper is an incredibly good conductor of electricity, and our bodies are electromagnetic energy circuits. So wearing this type of jewelry, and that's certainly either gold and or copper, would certainly have a beneficial effect in terms of, electrical conductivity.
Yeah. And you can see in every case, they're always like touching each other with an ankh or with some other tool that they have. They're always making these connections everywhere. And then, of course, you have the Dendera stuff that just looks electrical. I don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah, so that glyph is from the crypt in Dendara. That's the same place as those light bulbs. And
yeah,
the thing that you can see down there, that semicircle down at the bottom with the four pillars coming up out of it, that's actually the same thing as that necklace that you just showed. So this is depicting the same type of electrically conductive necklace artifact. That's what that thing is representing. And then the four things on top of that necklace are the sistrums. It's supposed to be a musical instrument. Hathor is directly connected to music, and there's an instrument called the sistrum, which is sort of like a rattle that the dynastic Egyptians used for musical ceremonies. So there you have this like electrically conductive necklace apparatus that's integrated with the sistrum. And anytime I see the integration of these two things, I think activation of acoustic properties and, sound healing or something of that nature. The Dendara temple is absolutely a healing temple of some sort. I don't get too much into like the metaphysical aspects of the function of these things, but there's definitely something special about the Dendara temple that was utilizing electricity in a way that was therapeutic for the people that were going inside of that structure. There's underground water. There's, again, these electrically conductive butterfly clamps all around the outside of this temple. And when I originally, so you see that vessel there on the left, and it's pouring the beads into the sistrums. I always thought that that represented either telluric currents flowing into the temple itself. So my guides have explained that this whole scene represents the temple itself, because the temple has 4 big pillars on the outside of the temple. So they say that this thing represents the Hathor temple. And I always thought that those streams represented either telluric currents or electric current of some sort in the activation of the temple.
Any idea these little symbols right here?
Yeah, so that's a solar bark. It's a boat or an ark that's holding the power of Aten or Atum, the Ra, like the sun god, is in that little boat.
I see. And these represent Hathor, these pillars, right?
Yep.
And that Hathor is also presented on the 4 pillars of the temple.
Yep, that's what the outside of the temple has, these big columns that have that Hathor, weird ear looking cow human thing. That's a depiction of Hathor, which is one of the gods of music.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, this definitely looks electrical. This reminds me of the like they're doing electrolysis or something, like, but with the vessel and
but
and then they have the connections going on over here too. These I noticed in this like knife-like tool. I don't know what that's called, but this knife-like tool, I noticed they use that in some depictions where they're putting that up against the jed, and as if to make a connection between the plates on a jed with these things.
And I've asked many of my Egyptologist friends and tour guides and, like that are formal Egyptologists, and there is no decided, conventional, agreed upon explanation for any of these things in the Hathor temple. Nobody knows what it means.
Nobody does.
Yeah, there's
Nobody
no
figured out the big light bulbs, huh?
Yeah, well, that's another one. There's some speculation about what those things may represent. I've proposed various ideas on what I think it could be, but there is no conventional understood explanation of what these things actually represent. This is one of my favorite glyphs from the Hathor temple.
So you're saying that this whole image here represents the temple itself. This represents the temple, and this would represent the earth delivering its energy to the temple.
That was the first time I went into that little crypt. So you have to go down into the subterranean areas inside the Hathor temple. It's called a crypt. And you have to crawl through this little tunnel to get down underneath the floor. And then there's this small passageway. It's like, maybe 3 feet wide and 20 feet long. And on both sides of this passageway, it's lined with all of these enigmatic glyphs. And this is down inside of that crypt. So it's sort of an enclosed, mysterious area of the Hathor temple that has all of these strange depictions that nobody has an agreed upon consensus on what the meaning is.
Now, is this the same temple that has the bowls in the big coffins?
The bowls in the bowls,
the subterranean chambers where they have the big stone.
That's the Serapeum in Saqqara.
Oh, that's a different place. Okay.
Yeah, different structure. Yep. Yeah, so this one is in Upper Egypt, where so Upper Egypt is like the temple area of Egypt with Luxor and Karnak and Dendara and Abydos. It's mostly temple structures, and then Lower Egypt are your pyramid sites. The Serapeum is in Saqqara with the Step Pyramid, the Pyramid of Winis, and the Pyramid of Userkaf. That's all in the Saqqara complex.
Okay. How long should I plan to stay if I came? Like a week? Would that be enough to get around and see everything, or would I need to spend a couple weeks?
So, I mean, if you wanted to do just Lower Egypt, just the pyramid sites, you could do that in 5 days comfortably, including a trip to the museum and, have some easy time. If you also wanted to do Upper Egypt, including the temples, I would say about 10 days total.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to see a lot. So here we have the Dendera light bulbs, right?
Yeah.
And what impresses me about it are the figures underneath with their heads touching. And you notice there's like this globe here. Their heads are touching it. And just there's so many depictions, other depictions where the pharaoh or another image is being touched on the head, or something is being touched to their nose, the ankh or whatever. It just seems to me like they're electrifying themselves. They're either shocking themselves or developing an electric field around their heads using these different devices.
Yeah, and others have suggested that those are like plasma filament globes. One interesting thing, so you see there on the left side that image of three different hieroglyphs.
Are you talking about up here?
Yep. Yeah, so that third one is actually the symbol for gold.
Right here?
It's called Nebu.
Ah.
And that symbol for gold is all over that crypt. It occurs over and over and over and over again in the Dendara crypt. That
Is
symbol,
this
yep,
it right here?
it's there at the top too. Yep.
So gold.
Yeah. So
What do the others mean?
anytime you see that symbol, it's called Nebu, which is the dynastic hieroglyph for gold.
Fascinating. So this is like the most puzzling of all, because one wonders, was this a real thing that they built? But it seems symbolic to me that it's a symbol of some action that they took, but I don't know. It's so enigmatic to look at this. They have the Jed here and these connections. I mean, it looks like light bulbs and some kind of power supply. I don't know how else to take it. And I think they're trying to depict the mysteries of electricity that they didn't understand any better than we did.
So would you like to hear the conventional best guess interpretation on what that means?
You bet.
Okay, so there on the left side, you see the woman with the hands open like this?
Yes.
So no, the one standing on the sitting on the brick with the
up
globe
here?
on top of her head. Yep.
Yeah.
So that represents Nut, the sky goddess. And then the Jed pillar is the backbone of Osiris, again, representing stability. And what this thing is supposed to mean, the globe itself, like the bulb, represents the, what is it, the placenta, the womb. So what this is depicting is like the birth of the universe and the dawn of creation, with Nut, the sky goddess, supporting the womb of the universe, or the embryo of the universe that's permeated with life force. So this serpent in the middle represents, in my opinion, the electric life force of creation and of the universe. So here we have a bulb or embryo that is holding the life force and energy and electricity of creation that's supported by the sky goddess and held up by the backbone of Osiris, representing balance and stability which in my opinion also represents electrical stability of the universe itself. Embryonic sac. Yep.
Okay.
So that's the sort of best conventional explanation of what they're depicting there, with Nut the sky goddess and the Jed pillar and this snake thing. So these are supposed to be papyrus. Like you see the little bulbs of the papyrus, and from the papyrus grows the embryo that holds the life force of the universe.
This represents papyrus here.
Papyrus, yep.
Okay.
So I think they are absolutely trying to communicate, again, a la the electric universe theory, that electricity is the generative life force of creation. And it's supported by the sky goddess and by the Jed pillar, which represents the balance and stability of the universe and electrical stability. And
that's, I can see what you mean.
But there was also a guy that recently came up. He said it was like he did an experiment and redesigned this thing. I forgot whose channel it was on, but it was filled with I want to say it was mercury vapor, and it was a plasma tube, and he was actually able to get this thing to work. You know, a Jed pillar, quote unquote, plasma tube.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, they knew how to. They used glass. They made things with glass. They knew how to process
for sure,
and make glass, and so it is possible that these were actual artifacts. But I think it's more symbolic, like you suggest.
So they actually have in the Egyptian museum, in the old museum, one of my favorite exhibits in the museum is the glass room, and they have all of this stuff that. It's literally laboratory glassware. It looks like reflux condensers and distillation apparatuses and vessels and beakers and all this stuff. And there's these big, long tubes, huge glass tubes that look almost just like that. It's a big rounded end at one end, and it comes to a point. It looks almost just like those things in the museum.
And these are artifacts from Egypt?
Yeah, glass. I've
never seen that. I assumed that all that would have been broken. You know, there was nothing left of
it's one of my artifacts. It's one of my favorite exhibits in the old Cairo museum. It's a very obscure. They've got it like hidden over in the back corner. And every time I take groups through the Cairo museum, I have to go find the glassware case, because there's like there's little test tubes and like measuring beakers and Erlenmeyer flasks, and you know, again, this distillation columns and all this crazy looking. It's obviously laboratory glassware.
Wow, that's stop number one after the pyramids. I want to see that. Amazing. So here's the Jed, and this is why I get the impression of reeds. I mean, from depictions like this, that it's made of, you know, the center at least is made of reeds.
So they had to get the inspiration for that symbol from somewhere. So at some point there had to be an artifact that was this pillar. I don't think it was just purely a symbolic image that they just all of a sudden decided on, we're going to use this iconography. There had to be an actual artifact, like a large pillar or a column or some sort. There's never been one found.
Yeah. Here they have it. See, again, with the hands wrapping to touch across the plates.
Yep. And this image is from, again, you've got Abydos in there. It's from the Temple of Seti I, where they actually have a series of glyphs representing the preparation of the Jed pillar. And you can see in one of them, it's actually wrapped in a cloth. So they used to, and again, going back to your hypothesis on static, you know, one of the ways that you can create static is by using a cloth.
Is this depicting that?
Yeah, yeah. You see that wrapping around the bottom of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's wrapped in a cloth. It's like wrapped in a garment, and you bring the thing out, it's wrapped in a garment. You then unwrap the jed pillar, you raise it, and then it's tilted over to the side.
Interesting.
And
And it
again, they
looks
don't
like,
they don't they don't have a good explanation for what any of that means.
yeah. Well, more touching of the tools. And then another picture of the dendera. And this is another where they've got the little glow ball right there above their heads. It's like
Yep.
in this depiction, it's like they're getting, I mean, if you were next to a plasma ball, you would be getting a little spark there. That's seems to be like what is being
And
depicted.
the interesting thing about those Dendara glyphs is it shows several different configurations. So you'll notice in the first two, let's call it Nut and the Jed pillar, were both separate. And then in this one, you have them both together. But this one, the Jed pillar is actually touching the snake itself. And in the other one, the Jed pillar is only touching the bottom of the globe. So
Right. Yeah.
there's several different configurations here, which represents, so everything in the Dendara crypt is a series of images, right? And you have to look at the entire sequence of images to be able to understand what they're actually trying to communicate. So there's actually 4 different depictions of this Jed pillar. There's 2 on one side and 2 on the other side. And all 4 of them are different. There's slight changes in each one of the depictions, which is communicating something. And you'd
Yeah.
really have to learn how to read the entire crypt from start to finish to be able to understand the full message of what they're trying to communicate. They're like little initiation rooms where you would go in and be instructed on the mysteries of their ancient knowledge by going through and reading the sequence of glyphs on the walls.
Yeah. I've never seen the entire depiction in context like you're
It's
talking about.
crazy.
I've only seen like individual shots like this.
We actually have, and I'll get my wife to send it to me and I'll send it to you. We have a LiDAR scan of
Uh
this
huh.
crypt. So you can walk through the whole thing and see it in real time. And she's got all the walls scanned.
Uh
So
huh.
so you can walk through it in the LiDAR scan and see the whole thing in 3D. It's really cool.
This one image just screams electricity to me because this is like depicting circuitry.
Yeah, yeah. And they certainly do have it. You know, the bottom of the papyrus, let's call it that, is connected into the box. The box is connected into the globe, and then the globe and the filament inside of the globe is connected to the Jed pillar. So it is absolutely a circuit of some sort, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's another depiction where they're touching his big hat. It just seems to me they're always putting their hand on the shoulder or on the head or both. And it's just again and again and again.
And there's a
And I
lot
don't
of
know if that's drawing energy from the pharaoh or delivering or whatever, but it's continuity. It's making a connection.
and there's always balance in the dynastic Egyptian iconography that's representing, positive and negative as well. There's
Uh-huh.
always 2 sides of it.
Mm-hmm. And then this one also, I have no idea. Here's your snake. We just don't have the dendera bulb around it, but
Yep.
there's the snake with all these connections. Do you have any idea about these candy cane things?
So I've never seen that, but obviously, I mean, so, when it comes to the serpent, it's obviously a symbol for ancient electricity, whether it be telluric currents or when it comes to the dragon or Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, lightning symbols, ancient energy, life force creation, whatever you want to call it. But that serpent is certainly being anchored to the ground there.
That's exactly what I see. Yeah.
Yep.
So here's another just depiction of one of the necklaces.
Yep.
Here they're, they're doing something to treat the tool, and they're either purifying it or giving it a charge or decharging it, something with these fumes of these incense burners or whatever they're doing, it seems to me. More nose zapping. So like I said, I don't have any, these are not in any particular order. I just threw a bunch of slides together that I've been looking at that just show the kind of electrical, he's got his hands around the head. And of course they're wearing the necklace and the headgear and touching the nose with, I don't know if that's not an ankh, some other tool in this case.
So
But
an interesting thing about this one, you see in the guy's right hand, he's also holding something else in his right hand.
You're talking about this one?
Yep.
Down low.
Yeah, so that's a bit of another unexplained artifact. Is sometimes they're holding these, like, it's like a little column, or nobody really knows what it is. Sometimes they say it's a stamp because it has the name of the person, where you could stamp something, but he's holding something else in his right hand. That we see this a lot in some of the statuary around Egypt. They're holding like a little tube of some sort.
Yeah. Well, I think those are the only pictures I have of Egypt.
So now I'd love to jump in, if you have some material, to your work on the enigmatic and quite bizarre, and up to now, in my opinion, completely unexplained Sumerian handbags.
Oh, you want to look at the handbags? Okay. Can we take a quick break?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you can give me 5 minutes, and then I'll be right back, and we can talk about that. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Be right back. Are you seeing my? Okay. What I'd like to do is go through a little presentation to take you how I arrived at my theory about the handbags. Okay.
Yeah, please do.
So if we go back to electric universe origins, and Anthony Peratt, who's a plasma physicist at Los Alamos, he still works at Los Alamos, in fact. He determined that the ancient petroglyphs of squatter man images are actually depictions of a plasma discharge that would have been seen in the polar skies as a result of an EMP type event hitting Earth that would have caused the magnetic field to light up, basically, with the plasma glow, and you get what's called a Z pinch in the plasma discharge that would have been seen in the sky, in the night sky, that it would have lit up in this kind of an image. And that's what ancient man saw in the sky, and then pecked into the rocks, what we now call squatter man. And here are a bunch of examples of squatter man. They're all around the world, packed into rocks all around the world. Here's one in Spain. Here's New Mexico. So there's South America, Europe, every continent except Antarctica. You can find rock art that depicts this same image of squatter man. So it's obviously something that was seen around the world, in the sky. And this is an artist's depiction of what it might have looked like in the sky, in the night sky or early morning. And this is an actual squatter man that I took a photograph of here in Arizona.
So let me give some people that don't know and aren't familiar with the general concept of the electric universe theory. They suggest, and I actually 100% agree with this conclusion, that there was a different configuration of the celestial bodies, including the planets, in our ancient history. And what this ancient people were witnessing were the conjunctions of the different planets in the sky. And the conjunction of these electromagnetic celestial bodies would create large-scale plasma discharge events. And they were depicting these plasma discharge events in the various petroglyphs and rock art. And Anthony Peratt, I believe, is the main contributor to this hypothesis in the interpretation of the petroglyphs, and actually gives a spectacular explanation of how these celestial conjunctions and plasma discharges were then interpreted into this rock art. Do I have that correct, more or less?
Yeah, that's correct. Both in rock art and in mythology, because
Yes.
if you study mythology, it's always the myths are about the moon and the Mars and Jupiter and Venus. And ancient man, if they were looking at the same sky that we're looking at, and these tiny points of light up in the sky aren't that remarkable. And yet they have these stories of battles and wars and warrior gods, and Mars being a scarred god, and
Yeah.
and yet
So,
it's
for
just a
example,
tiny
like
light.
Vallis Marineris, this
So they
huge scar across the face of Mars. The electric universe contributors have proposed that this is actually electrical discharge scarring. There are no geological processes on Mars that could explain this feature, but when you look at it from the interpretation of large-scale electrical scarring, it actually fits quite nicely in terms of the creation of this huge gouge across the surface of Mars. And I believe it's Eve Cochran that did the work on the Eye of Horus in ancient Egypt, connected
yeah,
to Venus, I think, if I remember correctly.
I believe he did.
Yes.
And I wrote an article about Mars and the cause of Valles Marineris being an EMP event that hit Mars and basically blew its fuse.
Yeah.
So the evidence is out there, both in the planetary scarring, like Mars, Valles Marineris. Look at the moon and the craters on the moon.
Yep.
Those are electrical discharge craters. They're not impact craters, according to our theory. And we've studied this, and we've done lab experiments to show that electrical discharge does create the type of craters that we see on the moon and on Mars and the other planets. And so, what Peratt determined was that these petroglyphs packed into the rocks are also depicting imagery that they saw in the sky as a result of plasma events going on because of high electrical events, the planets being in disorder and in different orbits than they are now. And there are differential potentials between the planets that would cause electrical discharge events and cause plasma discharge events in the sky that people would see, and then they scratch them into the rocks because they don't know what they are, right? They're big mysteries to the ancient man. Squatter man comes in many forms, and it goes through evolutions. It's not just one static image and so it can get kind of crazy with. This is another example of how squatter man the variations of squatter man that you can see in rock art around the world.
So will you share your screen again, Andy? All right, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the video. And if you want to help support the channel, you can pick up a copy of the book and grab some merch at thelandofchem.com. The second edition Egyptian blue version is now back in stock. Same text as the first edition, just a new color design and a brand new merch drop. Inazuma Kagaku, Lightning Chemistry. Absolutely gorgeous kanji calligraphy designed by my Japanese tattoo artist Shin at Funky Guns in Kobe, and all of your favorites, including stickers. Links to everything in the video description below. Thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yep, there we go. We're in business.
Okay.
So maybe just start back from the beginning of that presentation so we can walk everybody through the images so that they're familiar with this squatter man. Yep. Yeah. So this is some of my.
I apologize.
I remember when I started following the electric universe again, maybe 10 years ago, and I started seeing these images, and I think I sent you my work on the Shatra and the pagoda, and how all of these sort of temples also encode this same plasma Z-pinch formation. So like the Shatra is this big column that has, I believe it's 9 pinches, which is the exact same thing that they found in plasma Z-pinch formations.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you recognize what a Z-pinch or discharge looks like, then you see them all over the place. Actually, they're depicted quite a bit. So in the top left, you see what a plasma simulation depiction of a plasma instability. And basically, this is called a Z-pinch. What you have is a magnetic pinch going on here that is constricting a current flow up and down through this column. And then a torus is developing around that pinch. And the torus, if to someone observing this in the sky, seeing this in the sky from Earth, would see a man-like figure, a stick figure with 2 round balls around it, as you see the plasma density would depict. And that's what we have packed into the rocks, petroglyphs all around the world. So and we call this squatter man.
Yep.
And
again, to clarify, that image on the top left there in purple is actually a laboratory created plasma formation. So they've generated this in laboratory experiments that create this plasma Z-pinch formation, and it 100% matches this iconography found all over the planet.
Yeah, so you can see these are samples of squatter man taken from rock art around the world. It's on 6 of the 7 continents. Antarctica is the only place where it hasn't been found. And the mainstream believes that they say that this rock art is depicting people dancing. But you can see the similarity around the world with the 2 dots on either side. It's more than just something depicting people dancing. It's depicting something that they all saw in common. And the actual plasma distorts in the sky, so sometimes it will look like it has a bird's head, and you quite often see depictions in mythology of characters with birds' heads and other features like that. This is an artist's depiction of what it might have looked like in the sky, a squatter man, the plasma image as a result of a large EMP hitting Earth. And this is an actual squatter man pecked into the rocks. And this is a photograph I took in Arizona of squatter man. They're very prevalent in the American Southwest. Here's another squatter man showing a little bit different configuration on the head. And here's one of the weirder squatter man images that was taken. And then you see a lot of petroglyphs. I want to go beyond squatter man and describe some of the other petroglyph images that we see commonly in rock art. A lot of it is just a lot of squiggly lines like this. And the reason for that is called tessellation. This is obviously a pool water, and you see how the waves of the water focus the light into these cellular features, and that's called tessellation. If you take and look at these individual features that are made by the refraction of light, and what is being depicted here is light diffracting through the plasmasphere surrounding Earth during an EMP, because the plasma around Earth is going to be light up in sort of like the pool water, with light shining through it, sunlight shining through it, but being distorted and diffracted by waves in the plasma itself. And so you get standing wave patterns that then people would have seen, and that's what they depicted in these strange rock arts, which are just like patterns, right? All kinds of grid patterns. And it comes from the science of tessellation, which is the cellular structure being formed by interference patterns in the waves.
And these things are often found in conjunction, where they find the squatter man and the tessellation depiction on the same rock or in the same area.
Yes, they're almost always found together. And then there are certain other images that are also found and that relate to the hydrogen wave function. So if the plasma around the Earth is heavy in hydrogen, hydrogen will excite and develop these spherical harmonics that depict these different images. And so what you see in the rock art are concentric circles, very commonly concentric circles and spirals, which are a result of hydrogen excitation. You also get the flowers and stars, which is also another hydrogen excitation. The flowers occur when the hydrogen inside the cell is being excited, and then it alternates and then excites the edges of the flower, which gives you the star pattern, right? So you get both the star and the flower as this oscillates, pulsing its light. And then you also see this kind of it looks like two magnets facing each other depiction. This is Aborigine in Africa. And this is from one of the pillars in Göbekli Tepe. Now, your viewers are probably familiar with Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. It's one of the very oldest megalithic sites ever found, and it dates back to basically almost 12,000 years ago. And this depiction is exactly the same thing that's depicted here, and that comes also from hydrogen excitation, which gives you this kind of like two magnets facing each other.
So you're saying basically that the plasma discharge interacting with the atmosphere is creating the excitation of hydrogen in the atmosphere that creates these celestial, large scale formations in the atmosphere that these people were witnessing.
Yeah, and theoretically, if the Earth was hit by a large EMP, it could have caused electrolysis in the oceans, which would have evolved a great amount of hydrogen, which would have gone straight to the outer edge of the atmosphere and created a blanket of hydrogen, which then sunlight or any light passing through would have excited and created this kind of imagery in the sky. And so this is another petroglyph that we see very commonly. It's called goggle eyes, and it comes also from a hydrogen excitation. And you find goggle eyes depicted all by itself, but also in depictions of anthropomorphic forms. Another image of both squatter man and goggle eyes on a rock.
I've heard that also interpreted and incorporated in the symbolism of the owl, with the owl kind of having that same face and eye looking symbol.
Yeah, I also wonder if Hathor isn't maybe related to this as well.
Yep.
So you see the goggle eyes, it appears all over the place, like squatter man, very common. and it also, as I was saying, appears in statuary. So here's an example of statuary that incorporates the goggle eyes. And then these are both from the Göbekli Tepe and that region of Turkey. These are artifacts from 10,000 BC that depict the goggle eye statuary.
And a lot of the Japanese Jomen, some of
They
their,
also have that, right?
yeah, the pottery and the clay figurines have a lot of this same sort of imagery.
So this also is one of the pillars at Göbekli Tepe. It has this kind of H-shaped figure. And I don't know, whatever you call this, half moon figure. These things are also relate to hydrogen excitation.
Andy, so what's the proposed time frame of when these things were happening in our ancient history?
Well, the Göbekli Tepe, these artifacts I'm showing you here, are 10,000 BC, so 12,000 years ago. And that was the period of the Younger Dryas.
Yes.
From a climatological standpoint, that was a period when Earth went through an excursion, a climate excursion that from unknown causes. And it was not part of the normal cycle of ice ages that was occurring prior to that. Earth was going through kind of a normal cycle of ice age warming and cooling, warming and cooling. And then the ice ages stopped, and there was this one big excursion of cold called the Younger Dryas that lasted for about 1,000 years. And then the Earth warmed back up, and it stayed kind of warm and calm ever since. And we haven't seen any kind of climate excursion like that since then. But the Younger Dryas was an extreme event that affected particularly the northern hemisphere, but it affected the whole world, and nobody really knows the cause of it. So all of these artifacts, which are depicting these plasma events, are from that time. So theoretically, it was a plasma event, an EMP, that impacted the Earth, and the ancients witnessed it, and then they left they left the symbology as a result, which they got from what they saw in the sky.
So perhaps, the conventional explanation is that, the end of the Younger Dryas may have been the result of a comet impact, but the electric universe would rather interpret that as a possible, solar EMP that hit the Earth and caused the end of the Younger Dryas. And then the survivors of that cataclysm then started to create these depictions of what they saw in the sky during that event.
That's right. And so this is a depiction of Göbekli Tepe, or at least I believe the first and largest of the enclosures that they uncovered at Göbekli Tepe. These were all covered up, apparently covered up on purpose, and they dug them back out, and it's these ringed enclosures with what they're called T-pillars all around the edges. And then they always have two large T-pillars in the center, like this is the typical construction. And they're not quite circular. They're sort of a D-shaped pattern, it seems like, is the typical construction. And this is an artist's depiction of what that would have looked like back in the day, I guess. Yep. And you've got the two large pillars in the center, surrounded by a ring with pillars in the walls, and then concentric rings around that with pillars and sort of an entryway here. And it's my theory that what they're trying to depict here is the aurora that they saw in the sky. Because the aurora, when it's fully formed, will form a ring-shaped aurora curtain around the polar region. Your perspective on it will form it wherever you are on the Earth. You're not, unless you're right underneath it. It won't look like a circular ring. It would look like a D-shaped ring. And you can see it forms in concentric rings like this, another depiction of the aurora. And it also has tall shafts. So if you were looking at it and seeing the actual Earth's magnetic field lighting up with energized plasma, you would see these pillars and you would see the ring of curtains that they're embedded in. And I think that's what those rings at Göbekli Tepe are actually presenting. They're presenting a depiction of the aurora.
So would you agree with the statement that, circa 12,000 BC, the Earth was far more electrically active than it is today?
Oh, absolutely. It was far more, I think it was electrically active such that there were plasma storms that they experienced periodically that they had to deal with, but they were also able to utilize the energy from it and from the Earth as a result. So this is one of the T pillars, but they've anthropomorphized it, and and then these are all images from the same area, and the statuary is pillar-like. You notice they don't have arms and legs; they're pillars with faces, and they all have the kind of goggle-eyed, expressionless look on their face. There's no personality there. They're like mannequins. And I think the same thing was going on in Mesoamerica, and that's why we get these kind of figures like this all over the Inca. And
I really like that interpretation. They're celestial pillars,
that's right,
not made to represent humans, but rather the celestial pillars of these plasma formations that were being witnessed by the ancient civilization. That to me resonates much more than the conventional explanation that these are depictions of actual people. They're celestial pillars.
And they're found in conjunction with what are known as observatories, where they've identified, the solstices and all these other astronomical observations. So they are observatories, and these are artifacts surrounding and in and around these observatories. And then Easter Island, the figures of the Moai figures there, I think, are another depiction of basically the same thing. A different people at a different place saw the same thing in the sky and anthropomorphized them and depicted them in a different way. And so we see representations, whether it's Easter Island or we see the Greek statuary, the Egyptian statuary, the Anunnaki of Sumer. I think they're all depicting the same thing. They just evolved over time and got more elaborate in their depictions of what were perceived as the gods.
And I think the same thing applies when interpreting the different styles of the technology around the planet. For example, comparing the pyramids of Teotihuacan to the pyramids of Egypt, it's all based on the same technological processes and mechanisms of operation, but it was just done with the different style, artistic style of that particular civilization that was building it. So in Japanese, pyramid coromanta and stone circles, they have one particular aesthetic. In Egypt, you have one aesthetic. In Europe, you have a different one. And then South America and Mesoamerica, it's all done with the particular artistic aesthetic of that civilization that was either witnessing these phenomenon or building these technological structures.
Yes. And in the American Southwest, we have the barrier style pictographs that mostly in Utah, Colorado, like these, which I think are depicting the same thing. They're depicting these figures they saw in the sky, these shadowy figures, column-like figures, and that's how they depicted them in the American Southwest.
And a lot of people talk about these things being depictions of aliens. I highly disagree with that conclusion. I don't think it has anything to do with extraterrestrials. I think it's 100% atmospheric electrical phenomenon that they're trying to wrap their minds around and communicate what they were seeing in the sky to the future generations.
Yeah, and you can see the Google eyes right here. And just like the statuary from Göbekli Tepe, and it's showing the same thing, I believe, in different ways. So these are the barrier style pictograms in their various depictions. And then this is this was found, this inscription was found, this dates back to well, I'm not sure how far back BC, but this is one of the earliest depictions known of Yahweh, the biblical Yahweh and Asherah, which are two gods from the Bible, and from also, I believe, Asherah is in Egyptian mythology as well. But this is supposed to be a depiction of Yahweh. At least that's how it was marked in the when they found it. And so I believe it's depicting the same thing as these barrier reliefs in Utah. I think that's exactly the same thing. And so what I'm suggesting is that our mythology is all based on what the ancients saw in the sky and how they interpreted what they were seeing as a result of electrical storms that were occurring. And so this is also one of the T pillars from Göbekli Tepe, and this is where the first depiction I'm aware of the handbags. And the handbags are shown in a line up here. And what I'm suggesting is that the handbags are actually depicting the storm clouds. The plasma storms would have formed these looping rings, what I call coronal loops. In a plasma storm, they would have developed these loops from between a mesocyclone and a cyclone. In other words, a mesocyclone has a rising wind that rises up, and then if you have another cyclone near it, it has a central eye, and this loop forms from a mesocyclone to the eye of a cyclone, if that makes any sense. And we see the same thing happening in Jupiter's storms. You can see plasma storms on Jupiter that form these loops, coronal loops. And so I'm suggesting that that's what was witnessed in the sky. The other imagery here is various depictions of the plasma forms that would have been seen in the sky, the birds and the squatter man type imagery. And then the handbags are then carried on and depicted in Sumer by the Anunnaki, and in Mesoamerica as well. You see the handbags occurring in Incan and Mayan artifacts.
Oh, interesting. Those petroglyphs that have those. I've never seen that one before.
So this is from Australia. And so it's depicting the handbags. And this, I think you read this from right to left. And I think what you're seeing is the clouds, the handbags in the sky, the clouds, storm clouds, and below you see streamers reaching up, plasma streamers. And that's what happens in a lightning storm. You have plasma streamers that reach up from the ground as lightning comes down to meet it, right?
Yeah, step leaders.
Step leaders, right. Step leaders come down and to meet the plasma streamers that rise up from the ground. And we don't see those normally because they're too faint and they happen too quickly, but they're actually there. They're all around us in a lightning storm. And in the kind of plasma storms that we're talking about, they would have been visible. And so I think that's what this is depicting on the ground beneath the storms. And then the storm actually creates what I think is a Z pinch. It actually gets strong enough that it explodes into a Z pinch, like a big lightning bolt, except
Yeah.
huge, right? And I think that's what this depicts right here. And this, I think, is what's being depicted here. These berries that the Anunnaki hold. They hold the handbags and they hold these berries. And I think there's some kind of a depiction of the same event that the Australian Aboriginal depiction is in this petroglyph.
I mean, it does look like plasma filaments.
Right. And I think that's the plasma in the aftermath of one of these discharges. That's what might be seen in the sky as an artifact. Anyway, that's my thought. It's a little bit sketchy. It's a little bit speculative, but I'm looking for more and more evidence to piece together because it's starting to make more and more sense.
So when you first started explaining this during our conversation on the Brainstorm podcast, I was totally blown away. And this is the main reason I wanted to have you on today, was for kind of a discussion so that you could present this, which is a correlation to my hypothesis on these white horse cumulonimbus thunder and lightning storm generator systems, is that this ancient civilization was building landscape engineering projects that enabled them to generate cumulonimbus lightning storms. And when I saw and heard your explanation about these representing plasma storms and these, individuals carrying around these handbags, to me, that really connected to my hypothesis on the utilization of these landscape engineering features to be able to create these storms, and carrying around the technology for thunder and lightning storm generators all around the world, which are part of the power source of ancient stone circles around the planet.
Yeah. We talked about the handbag being used like in the Anunnaki representations and in the Mayan representations, where they have a figure carrying the handbag.
Yeah.
They're carrying the knowledge of how to create storms. They're carrying the knowledge of how to tap into the Earth's power.
Yes.
And utilize it. That's what you had suggested. And I think that makes more sense than anything else I've ever heard.
All right, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the video, and please remember to subscribe to our 3 other channels: my wife Alexa's channel, Archaeoalchemy, our mutual international travel and culinary adventure channel, Let's Go with Lex and G, and the best channel on YouTube, Egyptian Trash Cats. For all you cat lovers out there, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video. So I've also heard that these handbags have been connected to agriculture, in the sense that they were carrying around fertile soil from area to area, which would also kind of connect with my hypothesis and theory about these ancient structures, is that they were utilizing these lightning storms for the production of atmospheric nitrate fertilizers for agricultural applications. So it's sort of a cumulative representation of knowledge that encodes their ability to create and carry these thunderstorm generator systems that also directly connect with agriculture and farmland, etc.
Yeah, and electroculture, I think that's what the term that is being used, is becoming very popular. People are putting antennas in their gardens, in order to bring in, and it seems to be working. People are doing it all over the place nowadays, and I think that's really interesting, because electricity itself, just the application of charge, I think helps nitrify the soil and create fertilizer, or create fertilization.
Yep. So I want to throw something else out to you, Andy, that was, I just recently did an episode on my members channel about the connection between lightning, radio waves, Schumann resonance, and human consciousness. And I proposed that one of the reasons that human beings were able to take such a dramatic leap from, Ice Age, Neolithic, hunter-gatherer civilizations into building the Egyptian pyramids was possibly an unintentional byproduct of this ancient lightning technology that also stimulated Schumann resonance. So when lightning strikes, it creates a resonance between the surface of the Earth and the upper ionosphere in this resonant cavity that surrounds the Earth that generates Schumann resonance. Schumann resonance is kind of known as the pulse of the Earth, and it also happens to directly connect to human brain waves, specifically alpha and theta waves. So by creating this ancient lightning technology around the planet and developing these thunderstorms, again, carrying the handbag of this storm generator technology, they were able to possibly unintentionally activate human consciousness and develop human civilization to a level where we were able to go from Neolithic civilization, building stone circles and rudimentary megalithic technology. And then over several generations, we had such a exponential growth in our human creativity and cognitive processing capability that we've now reached the level where we can design structures like the Egyptian pyramids, being a direct result of the Schumann resonance from this ancient lightning technology. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I would go one further and say that the electric applying an electric field, a higher electric field, is has been part of our evolution and perhaps our brain, our consciousness. I'm agreeing with you, but I think it even goes. I think those depictions of the Egyptians with their headdresses and whatever they were doing, I think they were stimulating either a psychedelic experience or health reasons or spiritual psychedelic reasons. They were doing something there. I don't know for sure what the connection is and whether it's ever been tested, in very much in the lab. I do know that magnetic resonance has been used to stimulate some psychedelic type experiences in the brain. So I suspect maybe that's what they were doing in Egypt, with electricity. And I think there's a tie-in to the huge step that we took in consciousness in ancient times, because we went basically from apes in the trees to humans pecking artwork into the rocks, sort of very quickly. The DNA record, the genetic record, it looks like it happened all of a sudden. And I think that could tie into some kind of an electrical event in the past.
And going back to the thread of, our Earth atmosphere being far more electrically active at the time, perhaps that was the mechanism that drove the evolution here on the planet, taking us again from rather primitive to incredibly sophisticated in a relatively short amount of time, is the electrical activity, the generation of Schumann resonance, the impact on the human consciousness, the activation of brain waves, large-scale celestial plasma events, et cetera, all working in conjunction to develop human consciousness and the activation of our brains.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's, I'll go one further and say, I think that this is something that is known by secret societies. It's been kept from the general public, but I think it's something that is actually known. And there are people that know more about this than we do, but they're not telling. I mean, I believe that. And that's just a suspicion, but the more I learn, the more I find I don't know that other people know.
Isn't that always the case too? The more you try to research and the more you learn, the more you realize that there's so much more to learn and how little we've actually been able to figure out about the way the universe works. And especially when it comes to ancient technology, you and I were talking behind the scenes about writing and developing content, that it's an ongoing, never ending process, that as soon as you open the door to one new avenue, it opens so many other channels that, it's just, it's never ending process of trying to figure out the bottom of this ancient mystery.
Yeah.
So Andy, did you know that we were doing, Ben from the Brainstorm channel and I have been doing an ongoing series called In the Lab, where we're actually doing electrical and chemical experiments to test some of the theories that I've proposed here on the channel. And I would love to have you on for part 2 so that I can show you some of the videos from our experiments. Specifically, recently, we've been testing my hypothesis on the step-down voltage transformers and getting electrical current to arc between two pieces of stone. And we've actually been able to send pulsed DC 12,000 volt current through a series of 6 spaced stones. And it'll jump between the stones into the secondary electrode. So I'd love to have you on again, and I can show you some of those experiments and get your feedback on our electrical experiment design. We've been interested in incorporating you in the lab series coming up soon. We've just kind of been hammering out the details on our lab equipment and experimental designs. And I'd love to also go through so that we can take a look at some of the White Horse. Again, I'm wearing the White Horse Land of Chem merch today. The White Horse is an ancient symbol of cumulonimbus thunder and lightning storms. And these white horses are inscribed on geological formations across Wiltshire, England, which in my opinion are these landscape terrain engineered features that are for the creation of cumulonimbus thunderstorms. And we can go take a look at some of those and then evaluate them in conjunction with the electric universe plasma geology that also happens to surround all of these ancient structures. I'd love to do that with you if you're interested in coming back.
Oh yeah, absolutely, love to. The formations, the White Horse Formation, it's in chalk, right?
Correct. Yeah, chalk hillsides. Yep.
What is chalk exactly? The chemical
calcium carbonate. The same thing as limestone. Carbonate? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fascinated by that. Yeah, I'd like to do that. When I was in Bath, we had an electric universe conference in Bath, and I met some people there who were dowsers.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh yeah, we can show you exactly where the power lines are in the earth." They've traced them all out, and the telluric energy, and it was really fascinating to talk to these dowsers over there.
Yeah. And I don't think it's any coincidence that this area in Wiltshire, England is also, it's extremely prevalent to have a phenomenon known as ball lightning, like these glowing orbs that show up around all of these ancient structures and on these hillsides. There's actually one called Glowing Ball Hill, which these ball lightning phenomenon happens so frequently that that's actually what the hillside is known as. And then they also have, of course, crop circles. I don't know your opinion on crop circles, but these things tend to happen extremely prevalently in this area of Wiltshire, England. For some reason, it's like the crop circle capital of the entire world.
Well, it's interesting. Crop circles, Linda Moulton Howe did a documentary, and she had scientists look at the stems of these crops and there's evidence of electrical discharge. I mean, they are the result of an electrical discharge inside the plant.
Yep.
That broke the plant. That's what they showed. I mean, that's what I saw when I watched that documentary. That's the result of telluric currents reacting with something up in space, in the atmosphere. And yeah, so that crop circles are fascinating. And I think there's a bunch of fake crop circles out there. I think a bunch of
for sure.
Cambridge students have gone out and done stuff in the middle of the night to
Yeah.
fool people, but there are real ones too, and the real ones are definitely electrical in nature.
And they're so spectacular. Again, you can really kind of parse them out to see which ones are the fake ones and then which ones are the genuine formations that we really don't have a good explanation for. And that area of the UK is such a bizarre and mysterious and powerful place. I recently did an episode on Avebury. I don't know if you're familiar with Avebury at all.
Yeah.
Again, this massive serpent temple complex and the work of John Burke. Have you heard of the book Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty?
No, I haven't.
So he basically, the overall theory proposed in his book is that they were using some of these systems for seed gene engineering and for the enhancement of seeds utilizing electric and magnetic fields. So it works directly in conjunction with my hypothesis about ancient agriculture and atmospheric nitrate fertilizers, all using the same mechanisms of operation from telluric current to develop electric fields within the structure. And he actually showed that Avebury, so the stones of Avebury have a lot of iron content, and they're magnetized in a certain way that the whole thing may have operated as a magnetic ion cyclotron for the circulation of charged ions within the circle. And then I think so John Burke's work and my work are kind of two sides of the same coin, where his work addresses how the stone circle operates during fair weather, and then during a thunderstorm we know that the polarity of charges on the Earth's surface flip, and instead of negative charges you have positive charges that develop on the surface, and the whole thing starts to work in the opposite direction, pushing negative ions into the head end of the Serpent Temple complex. So he thinks it works in one way during fair weather, and when the polarity flips during a thunderstorm, the whole thing works in the opposite direction to send ions into the head end, which is my hypothesis for the head end of the Avebury Serpent Temple complex.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to see that. That's amazing. The one thing that I'm puzzled about is how they get current to flow. It seems like the resistance would just be extremely high. But if the earth itself is energized, and it's going to be a completely different environment than what we experience. So I don't think it's hard to predict what would actually happen in a highly electrified environment like that.
And an interesting, thing that I don't think a lot of people understand, that telluric currents are the result of geomagnetic flux, right? So the changes of the Earth's magnetic field are what create this flow of electric current. It's what is it? Faraday's law of electromagnetic induction, that this magnetic flux within the Earth is actually what creates this flow of electrical currents in the surface of the Earth. And if we're talking about a time period in our not so distant ancient past where the magnetic and electrical input into the Earth was much greater, the activation of these systems may have been exponentially higher than what we could anticipate or measure today.
Well, I can show why and how it would have been much higher. And that's a topic we need to devote a whole show to, probably. Yeah. But the moon had a lot to do with it. The moon's orbit used to be different than what it is now. And I can help tie together, I think, the cause and effect of what was going on and how it had to do with the moon being in a much closer orbit.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I've been talking about that a lot recently, is how Avebury, Stonehenge, and a lot of these ancient stone circles are lunar tracking mechanisms, and they were very preoccupied on the phases of the moon that also correlate with the tides, which appears to have a direct effect on lightning. There was an interesting paper that showed that there's 25% more lightning events during the new moon than there is during different phases of the moon. So the moon has a direct effect on the Earth's magnetic field, which has an effect on telluric currents, which also has an effect on weather and has an effect on lightning. So people don't understand how interconnected the sun, the earth, the moon, and all of the other planets in our solar system are an electromagnetically connected circuit. And this is the basis of the electric universe theory, is that we live in an electromagnetic energy circuit.
Yeah, people don't realize that, like mining engineers will look at where lightning strikes to look for where to look for copper or silver.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's not in the textbooks, but real experience tells people to do that sort of thing. So yeah.
I've also been talking about this a lot, how there's an inseparable connection between subterranean natural resources like spring water and metal ore deposits, telluric currents, and lightning strike locations. And there's a place in Australia called Lightning Ridge where the ancient Aborigines used to look for lightning strikes, and it guided them to valuable deposits of metal ore. And Lightning Ridge is one of these places in Australia where there used to be frequent lightning events, and now there's a huge metal ore mining development in Lightning Ridge in Australia, and the Aborigines knew about this as well.
Yeah. It doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah. The ancients were tapped into this because they were observant. They weren't inside the walls looking at a computer screen. They were outside looking at nature and really understanding it much better than we do. And I'm very convinced that people like Tesla didn't learn from books. He learned from looking at nature, and he talks about it. And if you look at what Tesla talked about and wrote about, he talks about, seeing the colors in the clouds and the form of the clouds. And he was seeing the electric action in electromagnetic action all around him and learning from it. And that's where he got three-phase power. The idea, he didn't come up with it. He just witnessed it and copied it. And anyway, that's my belief. And I think the ancients were able to do that, but I think they also had more to look at. I mean, it was more a direct link because they were experiencing it.
Andy, so we almost hit 2.5 hours. This was absolutely spectacular. So I would love to have you back on for part 2. This is going to be kind of ongoing discussions here on the channel. And again, you are somebody that I hold in the highest esteem with the utmost respect. I cannot thank you enough for your acknowledgement of my work. Again, that was by far the biggest accolade and compliment that I have ever received in regard to my theories about the ancient technology, was to wake up that morning and watch that video on the Thunderbolts project and then to read your article. It really, thank you so much. I can't express enough in words how much that meant to me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. You deserve the recognition, and I know you're going to get more. I hope both of our work gets recognized. I think it will. I think our day is coming to where people are looking for real answers, and I think they'll start to start hearing voices like ours and realize that there are answers out there. And I think we have a lot of work to do together in the future. I'm looking forward to it. Anytime you want me on the podcast, just give me a call. I'm happy to come on. But I think we need to get together and get some other people like Ben and everybody else together and start working on some of these things and fleshing out the answers and get more expertise involved. I think as time goes on, the interest in this is going to get bigger and bigger. And I think we're going to have a lot to do.
And I think this is part of, my ultimate goal of, I guess, my project was to eventually develop an interdisciplinary team of a variety of different people in specialties and expertise, geologists, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, chemists, physicists. You have to have the participation of everyone to really, really get to the bottom of this mystery. And, sometimes from my perspective, one person has to be the idea man. And I think the more I immerse myself in this, I just may happen to be that person that's able to gather this community together and get everyone together. And what we really need to do is continue to be in touch behind the scenes so that I can help coordinate your trip to Egypt. And we can go out to the Giza Plateau. We'll take a look at these iron veins. We'll go crawl around inside some pyramids. We'll go down to Dendara. And I really look forward to talking with you again. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Okay, Jeffrey, my pleasure.
Before we cut
Anytime.
off, is there anything that you want to promote? I know you're kind of quiet and behind the scenes, but is there anything that you would like for the people to know about or go take a look at?
Well, I have an article coming up on the Thunderbolts project, and it's basically what I showed today with the hydrogen excitation and the petroglyphs. That's what I talk about in the article. So I gave you sort of a preview of that.
Awesome.
And that should be coming up towards the end of this month, I think, in about 3 weeks on thunderbolts.info.
And I'll put a link to your blog and your website in the description below. I'll put a link to the article that Andy wrote about my work. I'll put a link to, I think you have an actual playlist on the Thunderbolts project of Andy Hall presentations. So I'll put a link to that so everybody can check that out. Highly recommend it. Andy, thank you so much. And I will be talking to you soon, sir. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Have a good evening there, Jeff.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. We'll talk soon.
Adios.
All right, everyone. That is it for today's video. This was Versus Episode 2, Mechanical Engineer versus Ancient Lightning Technology, featuring the one and only Andy Hall. I really hope you enjoyed today's video, and in the next episode in the series, a massive research special presenting my theory for the function of the Pumapunku H-blocks. This is an episode you do not want to miss, so if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube, and remember to click that little notification bell so you don't miss out on new episodes. Like, comment, share, hype the video, and stay tuned. If you want to help support the channel and get access to some exclusive research content, check out the members-only channel and thelandofchem.com. If you want to pick up a copy of the book or grab some merch, links in the video description below. If you want to follow me on Instagram or on X, my handle is @thelandofchem. Also, don't forget, after you finish watching this video, please go subscribe to our 3 other channels, my beautiful wife Alexa's channel, Archaeoalchemy, our mutual travel, adventure, and culinary experience channel, Let's Go with Lex and G, and the best channel on YouTube, Egyptian Trash Cats, for all you cat lovers out there. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. I think that's it for today's episode. So I will see you next time. Yo, are you still watching this? Please subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube and click that little notification button. New videos coming out every single week. And check out this other episode. Come on, do it. Do it now.